Hello, wow, you got very quiet, very quick. I didn't even have to ask. Thank you. This is a great room, and we know it might get a little noisy, and that's okay. We don't want you to feel like you have to leave. We expect kids here, and we enjoy your company. So we're here for the second meeting for the Martin Luther King Jr. Park renovation. My name is Mark Cosmos. This is my colleague Alexis Griffin. Together, we're going to take you through our process so far, how we got here, how we developed some goals, and then some design options, and then hopefully have a very hearty discussion about the site and project and what we have ahead of us and next steps. And before I continue, we do actually have some great support staff with us here as well as our counselor, Emily Semple, has joined us for tonight's meeting. We have Carolyn Burke is currently manning our front door for any latecomers, Emily Proudfoot, and Alyssa Gavette. And so with that, we're going to jump into some of the public feedback that we heard last time in the workshop, go through some goals, recap existing conditions, and then run through some design options. So with that, if I didn't forget anything, Alexis, please.
All right, let's do it. Let me get a snack. Oh, yeah, in the back. Yeah, so anyone that needs the restroom, it's back in the corner, it's a single stall. All right.
Just a little bit louder.
Yes, for sure. You can, but I'll yell for you as a theater. All right. So some of y'all attended this, but our first neighborhood workshop went off pretty well a few months ago. One of the biggest things that we heard from the neighborhood workshop was that there was a large safety concern, and this was primarily brought up by the neighbors. Another thing that we noted was that this park doesn't need a complete redesign, just some modifications and things like having a more robust playground, honoring MLK Jr., maybe some skate-friendly features, and things like lighting. We also had people take part in a survey. You all might have taken this survey. This survey really underlined that the top concern, again, for the people surrounding the park was that safety is an issue. The top desired uses that we saw for this park that people were wanting were things were places to gather at the park, underneath shade or not, or that the playground and the basketball court were actually usable and friendly to people that wanted to use it, that this park was an actual place to honor MLK Jr. Some desired new amenities that you might not see at the park that people wanted to see based on this survey were to see more public art in the space, to have interpretation that had to do with MLK Jr., and to have some skate-friendly architecture that maybe young kids could use and start to learn skateboarding. So through those different things like the neighborhood workshop, the survey, and our advisory group, we developed 3 different goals for this park, and I'll walk through those with you right now. Our first goal was to create a park that feels safe and well-maintained. Some ways you might see this in a park are through creating good visibility, giving more lighting, activating the space, creating more trash receptacles throughout the park, and removing illicit use. Now, thinking about safety being the top concern, we heard specifically from the neighbors of the park that, caravanning and parking surrounding the park itself was creating a lot of illicit activity, illicit use of the park. And so one of the things that we, or the city, thought would be beneficial was to add no parking signs around the park. And I wanted to take a quick show of hands. Have we seen any improvement around the park because of those no parking signs? Yes?
Yeah.
Not really?
A lot.
Okay.
A little bit. But
That's good.
I live within sight of the park too.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's good.
So this would be specifically for the car camping issues
Yeah,
around the
the car
park.
camping
That's what we thought it would help.
Okay.
Yeah, and it is currently a temporary no parking solution with set to expire soon here in about a month, but it's already being extended.
Yeah.
And
But-
depending on the feedback that we get from tonight and through our surveys, that's something that we can make permanent if that's what the neighborhood would like to see.
100%, yeah. And I think I just want to make sure we pin your comment for later discussion, if that's okay. All right.
Oh, I missed it. I need to jot it down. What was
Yes.
it?
So we'll- we'll-
Expiring 10 days, not a month.
10 days?
9:30.
It's gonna be extended.
It's been extended already.
Hasn't been reflected, unfortunately. All right, we'll mark that down. I'm gonna go to the next slide. All right, our second goal. to promote intergenerational neighborhood fun. Now, this might be seen through improving the play area that exists already, adding something like spray play, improving the basketball courts, that could be paint or concrete improvements, adding much more seating, because as you all know, there's only one place to sit right now unless you want to sit on the grass, and maybe even adding some small skateboard features. Now, our third and final goal is to create a park that celebrates and honors diversity in MLK Junior's life and legacy. Now, a lot of this can usually be seen through art or interpretive elements in the park. But other ways we can do that is through a beautiful threshold, maybe with beautiful plantings. Maybe we show that through caring for our mature trees and making sure that they last. All right, so
we're about to dive into a lot of options, but I just wanted to take a chance, this will be sort of our first chance to reach out and see if everything made sense so far. We went ahead and wrote those goals down just because it'll make it easier for us not to go back. But is there anything else we can repeat or clarify for you tonight? You had asked about the no parking, so that will be extended. Yes.
I know something, we're obviously not using a school bus yet, but that the school bus picks up at that corner also.
Oh.
And so that was something one of my neighbors who couldn't be here tonight was concerned about.
which corner, is it the one that's right by the sign?
Yeah, it's
That's
right.
where our kids get.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
And also, I don't know if it came up before, but speeding down like that street is often pretty intense. I don't know. if-
10 from Chambers to Garfield is pretty fast.
Yeah.
Speeding, is that what I heard?
Speeding, yeah,
Speeding.
I don't know if speed bumps are an option also as part of renovation.
Okay, so we'll park those so that we can talk about it at the right time. That's perfect. Thank you. Speeding on Grant.
10th.
And 10 between Chambers and Garfield.
Excellent. And we'll just let everybody know as well, not just for this park, but for others, we're also consulting with Black Advisory Committee, Black Community Advisory Committee, not just for Martin Luther King Park, but also for Maddie Reynolds Park, which is under design right now, and for Alton Baker Park. So we work closely with that group to develop a lot of these goals, which are based on, to start with, all of our public feedback, and then massaging that into what we came up with. So with that, sorry, Alexis, I'm a little slow on the
good.
switch there.
Fantastic. So we're going to talk a little bit about the existing park as it stands right now. I'll just have you flip. Yeah. All right, so this is a plan view of this. I just want to make sure y'all know that north is that way, so it might seem a little weird. Quickly too, these bubbles are the existing trees on the site, and as you know, this existing berm is right in the center. So reflecting on the safety concerns that we all have, the existing berm as it stands right now is creating this really low visibility zone up in that top corner, the west side. And that's something to keep in mind. But also what we want to make sure that you know is that removing this berm will also mean removing some trees. So you can't have one without the other. All right. And then we can talk a little bit about existing use areas. I can go color and pop up here in a
You're
second.
missing a,
Missing-
there it
here's some
is.
color. Yeah,
It was
yeah.
hidden.
Right, exciting. Existing basketball court, we all know and love. That is in great condition. So that's gonna stay the same throughout all of the concepts that you'll see. It's just gonna be improved in some way. The playground as it exists in this yellow, you'll see it expand. We won't talk about specifics today, but you'll know that that is happening in every concept. One of the specific things I want to draw your attention to is this brown gathering space symbol. If you can see it, sorry, I'm blocking with my giant hair. That's our one seating area currently. This is going to expand and act as our gathering space for all of our concepts. We're going to make it larger to kind of jump back to our second and third goals to create intergenerational exchanges and maybe even honor MLK Jr. And then we come to our entry sign. Now that's a standard sign you'll see at every park. That sign just shows you that it's MLK Junior Park so far. It doesn't do much to honor MLK's legacy. So thinking about ways we can make that threshold more beautiful, more engaging, and more educational perhaps is something that we're thinking through in these design concepts. So Mark's gonna run you through these concepts now, and I'll act as the slide person,
Okay,
and then.
thank
Yeah.
you.
All right.
Okay, and I forgot to do something. Forgive me. Remember, Alexis mentioned the existing trees are all up there. There are actually a couple up here on the top right side of the plan. There's some X's in there, and that's just to let you know that with this scheme, those trees are most likely going to be lost. But in general, we are keeping the highest value and the largest shade trees. We did have everything assessed by our urban forestry staff. And whether we were redesigning the park or not, those four were probably going to be the first on a chopping block, so to speak. So we don't feel like it is a huge loss, and we don't want that to affect some of the decisions. But Alexis was right. If we're removing the berm, and in this first concept, that's what we're proposing, is this design would be flat. So no berm in the center. With that, we lose a couple of trees over here, maybe some here, but right now we're keeping them. And with this concept, we're taking that play area and we're shifting it to the middle. In fact, we're going to kind of shift everything so that it occupies the center of the park. And we're doing that to activate as many corners, so to speak, of the park as we can, and spreading them out so everything has a little bit of elbow room. What that means is, and of course the courts are staying in place, so you won't see that move around. We're showing the entry a little bigger. So what that just means is that we're going to be working on not just the sign, but thinking of ways to embellish that, enhance it with art and interpretation. And then that leaves us room for flexible gathering area, which is one of the things we heard from neighbors and survey takers, which is that the one seat doesn't cut it. From one standpoint, we're looking for benches and other places to sit, but also places to gather. Someplace you can have a picnic, someplace you can have the event and say, let's meet at the plaza, or in this case, the flexible space. So that was option one, or option A, I'm sorry. Option B, you'll notice everything got tightened up here. And a couple things have happened. We are still flattening the site. So again, the berm is one of those elements that is really contributing to the safety and visibility, especially on the back side of the park. So by dropping that down, we can do a lot to improve those safe elements, to make them safer. In this one, we're actually moving our entry. You'll see it's gone here, and we're creating a new entry that's on Grant Street. The courts, of course, remain the same. Now, if you look to the top of the courts, rather than a large berm in the center, one very big, large, expansive lawn. And that's what we heard in some of our survey feedback, is that there isn't a flat space enough to kick a ball around, for example. And this is a small park, so we're not looking for a sports field kind of size here, but without any flat space, that was something that we wanted to work into at least a couple of our options so that everybody had choices and you can weigh in on it. The play would expand a little bit up and to the right towards 9th Street, and the flexible space would be kind of that organizing element right now. And next, for option C, here's the big picture. Now, what looks like it's still an open lawn is actually going to be a stepped landscape. So let's start at the courts again. The existing court stays the same. The entry goes back to the original location, and that allows our flexible gathering area to have a little bit more room to come out towards the street before we have some more elements in there. Our play would expand again up and to the right, and we think this would actually give us a little extra room to create a bigger skate element within the park. In fact, repurposing potentially the skate wall or the playground wall that's out there right now. Now you'll see we have berm listed on here. So right now that berm has a high point right here in the middle of the park, which creates low visibility behind it because you go up, come back down. What we're doing with this would be the entry would be at ground level where it is right now. We would come up to this section that says open lawn, we'd be about here. And then when we get to the berm, we'd be at the highest point or at about the same height that the berm is right now. What that does, though, it requires us to do a wall on the north side, but it creates this high point without the hiding spot behind it. So A, B, and C. And next, we're gonna jump to option A. Sure.
I just know at the last meeting, that one guy who had lived behind the park for many years was talking about the drainage issues and that's why the berm was created. And so I just wonder.
Yeah, we are, thank you. We're aware of the drainage issues and that's solvable with all these concepts. So it's not something that really hinders us, but it was nice to know. It's a good thing to bring up. Yeah, thank you. So here's what we're gonna do. If you look on the left-hand side of the screen on all of these, we're gonna go through options A, B, and C in a lot more detail. Those first three to give you the big picture. So 2 flat concepts, 1 concept with the berm, and then where things are located. So as a reference, those are going to be highlighted here on the left. So in option A, this is the one where we're taking all of our use areas and we're moving them to the middle of the park. Everything spreads out, has a little bit of elbow room. Our existing basketball court as a starting point is of course where it is. You'll see we've paved some areas in and around that. To the left, where this used to be just the lone entry sign, we've now added to that threshold landscape at the front, and then some wing walls behind that. And those walls become our canvas for art and interpretation of Dr. Martin Luther King and his legacy. And what the detail of that is, the art and interpretation, that's a whole nother process that'll start over here, but we know enough how to provide a canvas and space for that. And it makes sense to do it with the entry in this concept. Up or to the west, you'll see the playground, which is expanded and just has a completely different footprint. Each use area has light and benches. In fact, all of our options, just as a reference, playground is getting bigger in all options. So that's equal. It's just where it is. We are getting increased lighting in all of our options, increased number of benches, as well as a gathering and group area. So from that standpoint, all 3 options are equal. And yes, we're keeping the drinking fountain, but we might move it in some of the options. Thank you. So in this one, the playground is here, and you'll see we've got some little buffer spaces, some little lawn panels. We're adding a couple of trees for shade to the playground. And in this one, this actually happens to be part of the footprint of the old playground. And we just see paving that and turning that gathering space with a couple of those 4-seater tables, ribbon benches and tables for people to gather. The skate-friendly elements are then sprinkled in throughout the site. We've got 2 of them here, and we've added a little extra paving, so there's a little bit of room to jump up and do that. And let's look at that from a slightly different angle here. And I'll point out something. Now, there's somebody who hasn't taken the survey yet. That's, oh, you have.
It's just excited,
Oh, okay.
bigger.
Well, thank you for the extra excitement. I appreciate that. We appreciate that. So I've done something here just to make it easy for us to remember is that the green trees, those are existing to remain. The ones in the yellow are new. So option A, since we're flattening everything, remember those trees that were on the top part of the sheet? We're replacing those 4 with a couple here. We're also adding some here to the playground so we get some shade on the playground. And the 2 that are near the entry are towards the end of their life right now, and they're so overgrown with roots, they're at that point where we need to do something with them. But we would like to replace them. So in this, you can start to see some vertical elements popping up here, namely at the entry. And let's take another look at that from a different vantage point. So standing at the corner, this is about where that sign is right now. So the idea is we would create a little bit more of a beautiful planting area in front of the sign. And then add these walls to the right and left hand side of the existing sign.
What does the sign say?
Sign says Martin Luther King Jr. Park, neighborhood park. I think it does for this, but that's about the location where it's in right now. And it's actually blue. But in purple, you'll see those are those extra elements. Here, they are the walls. And we feel that because this is on a corner and you've got great sight lines, especially really close to the corner of the street, right through that, but it doesn't create a height issue when that's up front. If we were to do something like that towards the back, that might be a different story. So you won't see that back there. But in this option, we think that's going to work really well. And now we're just going to walk up to this point on the street and take a look at those 2 little blocks in the back. So we wanted some skate-friendly elements. We're not looking at creating a WJ skate park. This is a much too small park for that. But it would be nice to have some survey takers and neighbors said, hey, it would be great if we had some starter skills for building. That's the word I'm looking for. building blocks, someplace where you can learn some of the beginner skills of this game. So these seat blocks can double as seating or for skating. Both ways are paving.
There's the water fountain.
That's actually where the water fountain is right now. So in this concept, it stays right where it is. Next slide. Actually, let's go back to that last slide, just so that we can hide the next one. We want to do a pause, and I'm going to ask Alexis, who has a better memory than I, to pick, let's say, 3 people from the audience group, and we'll just jot down one thing that you like about option A. And the reason we're asking that is ultimately what we'd like to do is take all the great ideas from all these options and hybridize them into something that works for the park, for safety, for our goals, for the budget. And so we realize there are a lot of things to go through. We don't want to lose you, but we'd like to capture a couple of those so we can remember to go back. So there's our first. Alexis.
Oh, I didn't pick you.
Oh, sorry. That the picnic tables are under those really big trees that are already there. And they'll like actually be shady and for them to sit there.
Love that. All right, I'm picking someone.
Oh, I just like that.
No. I am picking. But yes. Go ahead, sorry.
I just like that it says Martin Luther King Park.
Thank you so much. Anything you liked in the first concept?
I like that the playground is in the middle, kind of reminds me of Monroe Park.
Awesome.
Kind of hoping that there might be like park benches around, kind of eyes in the middle, and hopefully more trash cans that don't have an open lid. You just kind of put a little bit of trash inside. Like a
Gotcha.
little
Not a catch-all.
Slot,
Mhm.
yeah.
So she liked that.
Yeah, repeat it louder,
Yep.
especially for the folks that are out on the.
Yeah. So I heard that you like the central playground and you'd like to see benching around so that I'm assuming parents or loved ones can sit and make sure
In the
everyone's cool
shade.
in the shade. Perfect. And that the trash receptacles aren't just a catch-all, but they have a slot that's easy to put garbage in, but not easy to either, I'm assuming, rummage around in or
It fills up every day.
exactly. Yeah. So thank you. That was great feedback.
I'm
Did I
just
miss
gonna say
anything?
Smart trash, because that whole idea is
Oh,
kind of captured a couple different ways. One, yes, we realize this is a park with a lot of urban influence. And so this is one of those parks where we consider doing a second can, even though it's really too small for that technically. That would allow us to keep the park looking tidy on its regular maintenance schedule. And we do all of our new cans this year. The park right now has an older can in it. All the new ones do have a lid on top so that you can't put medicine inside. Something to
Stop
that
people.
extent. But thank you, perfect.
Thank y'all so much.
So I just call that smart trash. I think that. Perfect. Thank you. Now, next time you can't choose the same 3 people.
No, I'm going to.
All right, next one. Option B. And can I get a time check, please?
6:30. We're doing
Okay,
great.
thank you.
Good job, Mark.
Option B. So just to look at the bubble diagram again, this is the one where we're tightening everything together. The idea being we're going to create this big open lawn space and we're moving the entry. Okay, so in detail, this is what that looks like. Existing basketball court in the same location. You'll see this is the formal entry to the park. And we've paved that all the way to the sidewalk. To the top of the existing basketball court, we have a big open lawn that's flat. We do have a loop walk just to make sure all corners are activated or can have people walking through them. Again, all of these show some kind of a lighting scheme with lights and benches. In the end, those lights are probably going to move around a couple of times as we massage and move things around because we'd like to, for example, pair benches with lights. I missed that on this one. We like to make sure that all corners are covered, and that takes a pretty detailed photometric analysis. We like to do that in the end when we're closer to one option. So we will get really good lighting on the park. The playground in this case is expanding up and to the right a little bit. And here's our gathering area. And now you start to see what that interpretation is on this one. You see these little rectangles. From this perspective, it's hard to tell, but before you advance, we're also doing a little something. Since we're paving this to the street, remember before we had that really beautiful threshold landscape at the corner with the sign? By doing this, we're kind of pinched, right? So our thought is to possibly steal some of the street right away, which we can do, and then do our beautiful plantings in there. If we're doing no parking on that street, If that becomes permanent, that actually goes with the bullet back. So, next slide. So again, the view is also from Grant Street. We'll do all these views from the same direction, at least to start with. There's our existing court. You can see our open lawn runs flat. And all of our options do include pricing for a fence along the neighbor's edge. I forgot to mention on the last one, but that will be here in all the different options. Now you can start to see those elements for art and interpretation. Because this is part of the pass-through space and people are walking around and through it, we felt that something a little bit more vertical would work, and then we don't have to worry about that hiding scheme behind, because being in the middle, in order to be able to see behind all of that, you'd have to be way out here on the edges of the room. So by keeping it small and vertical, we can kind of plan ahead and curb any hiding or illicit uses behind those now. What else? So the gathering space, a couple of tables, benches, lighting, open and flat lawn. This scheme option B, the one in the middle, does not have a skate element. So we heard in both directions, we want a little skate something. We heard we want a lot of skate something, and we heard that might make a little bit of noise for the neighbors. So we want to hear from everybody on those, and each of our options has some of that. Next slide. So just standing a little bit closer to that, these would be the bump outs with curb added, with plantings added. Those might even be stormwater planters. And then our vertical elements would start here. They can actually even continue to the park.
Right. Choose 3 people.
Let's make sure there's not one more. I think
There's
that's-
not one more.
There's not one more. You got
Yes.
the
I
secret
can
thing.
see,
So
yeah.
yes, please choose.
All
three.
right.
I'm gonna flip this over for a little more room.
Green shirt. What did you like in
I
the,
like the bump outs.
the bump outs?
Yeah,
The planting?
yeah.
Bump
Other
out
than that,
planting.
I'm just gonna throw in again, I really prefer the playground being more central so that there's
Playground
less
central.
people underneath it doing things that they shouldn't be doing on the playground. It just seems like it would be better in the middle.
Oh, when you say underneath it, what do you mean? You're talking about
going
the-
close and just finding drug paraphernalia,
gotcha.
melted things, burnt things, bottles, people just underneath it,
Right.
literally smoking cigarettes.
Literally, like on the structure.
Yeah.
Got it.
play structure.
So if the,
I'll jot that down as a negative, but I wanted to say this. We haven't started looking at the equipment itself, but we're thinking ahead, and if you'll notice what's in there is a placeholder, and I'm trying not to zoom in too close because we don't want you to fall in love with that yet, because we haven't picked it yet. But there are playground systems that are what I call a little bit more transparent. It's nets and climbing things, as opposed to platforms and walls that you can hide behind or get protection from the rain on.
Mhm.
And so we think that style of equipment is going to work a lot better for our park, because it's going to allow that site to be a little bit more open and visible.
but you're saying activate the space, make sure it's usable by the people that should be using it. Do you want to give me a thing?
I can echo that. I really like the bump outs into the right of way.
Okay.
Although I do want to kind of add to that the entry mid-block, it just faces an unimproved alley across the way. So
Great point. Great point.
I'm
Yep.
definitely, I like the bump outs for what it does for that street frontage. It is, especially with no parking, there's no edge, and it's a relatively wide right of way for the neighborhood scale.
Yes.
So very in favor of some element in the right of way along Grant Street.
Awesome. Good to know. But the central, yes.
I did a plus on the bump out.
Got it. Okay. With the,
I
yes.
have another
Oh, I'm
plus
so
for
sorry.
bump out.
Yes. Thank you. Love it. And then I'll let you go forth, even though we shouldn't.
Okay.
Let's write that down. Let's write that
I hear you. All right, thanks, y'all. Thank you.
That captures it, check our parks and list of visitors. We ready to go with that? Okay,
Good.
great.
All right.
And before we forget, are there any questions online? Anybody have?
Yeah, I
Okay,
can't see
thank
that.
you. And please, Emily, interrupt us if somebody does have it, because this is the first time I remember to look up. Thank you. Okay, option C. This is our only non-flat option. And even though it's not flat, I will say that those 4 trees on the top are still at risk. We're still at risk of losing them. And because they are kind of lowest on the value scale from an urban forestry standpoint, they do have a terrible surface rooting, which makes the lawn really hard to use, to mow, to even sit on, because those roots are clear at the top. We don't generally plant that maple species anymore. But by moving our berm and our high point up to the top of the park there, we'd be filling and putting soil on top of those tree roots. And so that's why I'm saying we might lose them anyway, but we're gonna try, okay? So with this option, we're at a low point here, right? We come up and then this open lawn would be its own little plateau. And then the high point of the berm would be up here. Okay. Court in its same location. Entry sign, just as it is today. And you'll notice we don't have the interpretation of Martin Luther King, which is our third goal. Here, in this option, what we did is we picked a spot. Since we're putting this berm in here and this high point, that's a pretty prominent spot at the back of the park. You'll see we kept that clear of trees so that we do have some sunny places, which means we've also got great sight lines at that high point. And so what we're thinking is, with this berm option, we would have a short retaining wall along that edge, and then the fence would be along the back of that wall and then would step down as it gets out to the edges of the 2 roads. And so that fence itself would be our canvas for doing artistic interpretation, talk about MLK's legacy, and whatever we come up with art and public spaces. Playground again expands, and you'll see this is our existing playground wall out there. We think we can repurpose at least part of that wall with a skate feature. And actually, with the help of some of our neighbors here, Mott, thank you, met with me out there and gave me a reality check, gave us a reality check, and let us know how we might still massage this a little bit to make it a little bit more workable. Go ahead and switch to that next slide. Oh, we're not at that one yet, sorry. I'll bring you up again, Mott. Basketball in the middle, entry sign with a lawn. Those lines on there are contour lines, so that kind of lets you know that the slope is starting to climb up. You'll see where that wall, existing playground wall is. This is about where that high point of the berm used to be. Only by knocking it down, we're actually seeing the backside of that wall now. Okay, and the playground again, a little bit closer to 9th Street on the north edge. Shade trees again in green. Yellow are new shade trees. These are existing shade trees that we're keeping, and the yellow are new ones that we would add so that we get some shade in the park and on the playground. Next slide. So this is kind of doing a cut right through the middle of that park. And if you can see the difference between those 2 lines there, the green one on the bottom is where the park elevation is now. The one on the top is what we're proposing. Okay. And so you start to see that the site is actually climbing up in grade really slowly up to the back. Next one might give us a little better angle. This red line, that's the existing berm profile that we have out there today. So that same section line, and this is the height that it's at. Our proposed design would keep that same height. It's just moving it out here to this edge. And then that whole lawn slopes to the front. So now we eliminate the hiding spot, but we did hear that some people like the idea of a berm or some berms or just a little topography, which is great. And this might do that for us. Next one. That same wall again, a repurposed as a skate feature. So in order to keep this in line with a beginner level skills, the middle is actually a little bit too tall, something I learned. The edges are workable. There's still a little engineering and figuring out to see if this can really happen. You'd have to really take it to the next level, but it's enough to say, hey, do you like the idea of having, this is almost having a little dedicated skating zone in the park. So it's a little more than the blocks, okay? But it would probably just be on these 2 lower wings, and then you do something in the different planting. Okay. with that. Oh, and then we're going to the three. So, oh, three more people.
Three more people.
Alexis, sorry. Alexis was waiting for me to figure it out.
Flex Ledger, would you like to tell us something? You don't have to. No, no problem. Would you like to say something about the last concept?
I mean, I think I like how the playground, I think in option B also does this, but it's expanding north where
Mhm.
there's existing shade. And I feel like the central playground, I like that idea of having it central, but also it's like gonna be a big sunny field.
Yeah, it'll
with
take a while
nowhere
for the
to have
trees.
Shaded benches, really, so I like that. Using that lawn over there that doesn't really get utilized by much other than some people sitting on the hills.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing. Wait, no, I already picked you. Would you like to say something? Okay, no problem. That's totally fine. Oh, yeah, no problem. Does anyone, just so I know if someone wants to say something, would you like to raise your hand if you want to say something about the last concept?
And
Okay.
if you've gone again, I'll let you go.
Yeah, totally fine. Oh, 1 second.
Oh, yeah, just, I don't know, I personally, the house that Brian and I just purchased is literally right next to the park. And I don't know if I'm just like crazy about the idea of having a skate feature, just because of the noise that brings to it. And I mean, that's probably other people too. I'm just not crazy about that.
All right, that's good to know. So noise and skate features not appealing to everybody.
Yeah.
Then you have something. Go ahead.
I was thinking we could also be the plans going all the way around.
Do you want the wall to go all the way around the playground?
No, all the way around
A bigger painter box.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Okay, a planter all the way around. Got it. Don't cut it off. Let it go. Perfect. Awesome.
I really like the idea of a art feature wall.
Oh, yes. Awesome. And do you have any location that you specifically like? Were you okay with the back wall being? You like that element? Okay, thank you.
Just came in. So yes.
That's okay. That's great. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
Oh.
Any
Well-
other thoughts though?
This might be a good time to jump to
Oh,
C, or just the next slide.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I like the idea of the berm being sloping down.
Yeah.
When it snows, not that that happens very often,
Ah.
but that berm is like the closest babyest friendly sledding spot. Plus rolling down healthy grass is fun if there's no grass.
ooh,
I don't want to force it whole, but I think the way we're redoing it though, it's not gonna be as, if we're gonna lose, because it's kind of coming down and then stopping and coming down again, we'll lose that. You know, right now, that whole berm drop is within this area, we're gonna spread it out to that, so it's not gonna be steep enough there. Unless you're.
These are good to know. You can build it up with the snow, you know? All right.
So that's a lot. And let's do this. I'm gonna flip these up just in case somebody wants to walk up and take a look. I'm gonna have these up on the screen, especially for those who are at home taking a look at this. These are our three concepts. And what we'd like to do is go through and have a discussion about how each of these relates to our goals. So I'll try to facilitate, moderate that with you. Okay, so. These are the sticky ones, right? This is a general note, right? B.
Yes, ma'am.
How will something like a skate feature be decided?
Through all of the different functions that we're happening, talking to the community and our advisory groups and using the surveys. But I think the next concept we have is going to be presented.
We haven't set a timeline yet, but the survey that is out there right now is asking some pretty specific questions. And we'd like to actually ask those similarly here with this group, because the nice thing about having it here live is that can turn into a little bit of a discussion, whereas online in the survey, you're picking A or B or C. And that may not leave the room for the discussion of the other category. So with respect to goal number 1, which is safety, again, the most important goal for the park. For visibility, lighting, removing illicit use, activating the space, trash removal, a lot of those things are incorporated into all 3 designs, but from the standpoint of a park that feels safe and well maintained, is there one of these that jumps out at you as the one that does that?
I go to B.
All right. Can you elaborate a little bit on B?
I think it has more open space. I'm not a great big skater. I like the fact that it has a more accessible acknowledgement of who Martin Luther King was, maybe more at the street level if you're all the way to practice here.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, yeah, number 1.
A plug for a skate feature, I feel like as far as activating the space, I feel like the goal of the skate feature is in part to draw more different types of people. You know, it's like if we're making the playground bigger, that's awesome. That might draw more kids and families. You know, the basketball court is there, but a skate feature could potentially draw teens. I mean, we've all seen how the WJ skate park has completely transformed under that bridge there. It just will draw a different demographic of kids, still kids in the neighborhood, you know, who might also want to hang out at the park and would be less inclined to do so if it's just like, you know, baby kid. You know, we can have a cool play structure, but they're still gonna feel like it's like for little kids. You know, for older kids. I think would be really awesome.
Just to make sure I capture that before we move on, because I'm not that quick.
I'm ready.
So you brought this up from the perspective of skate, but we're also on the safety topic. You hit on a good point, which is that bringing some skaters to the place, and there's probably a question there, et cetera. That's a whole different group that might start using the park, and that's a positive thing. Using the park, coming there for a reason, whether it's a family, a young child learning how to skate, or an older person learning how to skate. And so from that perspective, option C, because it's a bigger skate feature. Alexis.
Oh, Emily, I'm sorry. Yeah, can you? Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Since like we're all trying to get out of here, we're not all trying to. My plug was against the skate feature just because it is such a small park that a skate feature is also a little bit dangerous. If it's such a small park, there are like those other skate options. There's even Monroe Park, which is huge, which could probably use renovation too at some point. That would be way more apt to hold a skate feature. And I mean, yeah, some teenagers are great, but it's also a very tiny park. And like, it would be nice to also have a kid-safe park compared to a lot of the other parks in town.
All right, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you. Sorry.
No, don't apologize. You're fine.
Can I ask, maybe I missed it in the last session, but besides added lighting, how is the illicit activities being reduced?
So, couple things. One, visibility and sightlines. We already have that naturally between with the existing trees, just because they're limbed up pretty high, you can see. And we've actually walked the site with our park ambassadors and EPD staff that said, yeah, these, you know, the little berms that are right now out there along the edges like these, those aren't too bad. They can see over those. We still got good sight lines. But this large one in the middle, which an option C is brought down, but the large one in the middle, as well as this one that's kind of back here along those 4 existing trees, those are hiding spots, or not hiding spots. That's where bikes get torn down. That's where things happen. And so from a design standpoint, that's one physical thing that we can do. The no parking as a test is a second one, and that could be made permanent if there's feedback from the neighborhood and community to say, yes, we're okay with no parking at this neighborhood park. For the most part, neighborhood parks serve the immediate neighbors that tend to walk or bike there. And we are adding no parking in all the schemes. So, you know, that gets people to the park. Renovating the park itself and creating a playground that, that's bigger. We heard from some of the neighbors and survey takers that there are only 2 swings on there, which kind of limits you. So if you have a family with multi-age kids, you're likely not to come to this park. You're going to go to another park. So what that means is that that's one less family activating this park and using it. If it's a well-developed park and loved, and it has something for everybody, more people are going to come in there, and that's naturally going to push out the illicit use. From a park standpoint, as park designers and park, you know, we construct parks. We don't manage and run the enforcement. That happens with the different divisions of the city. We can do some things physically, but those have to happen by.
Yeah. Of course, look at me.
Well, because it looked like you wanted to add something.
Oh, well, I'll let Carolyn, and in all of these schemes, we are going to, you know, manage the park in the same manner, in that we have our park ambassadors that right now are visiting this park about twice a day. But what happens is they leave, and at night, you know, things can happen, people can move in. And so we're looking at expanding more park ambassadors and maybe even some nighttime security. We don't have funding for that right now, but that's a goal that we have, just to kind of keep it from escalating a little bit. Let's see, you know, as Mark said, parks can only do so much. We work closely with the police department and with our parking program to manage these things. But yeah, we'll be doing all of those things in any of these designs. Yeah. While we're on the topic, I'm really interested in seeing folks get a question first.
Yeah, ask, is the idea of security cameras completely wacko?
We haven't found it to be a great deterrent, and
And it also requires that somebody is available to monitor those
yeah.
and react to them in real time. Plus the logistics of physically routing the camera, getting the fiber line, connecting that fiber line to an older network in an older neighborhood like this. I know this because we tried this for the Cobra overpass. And it was very challenging to find the physical infrastructure to make that happen without really investing in a lot of bringing that into the specific site.
So it's a small park. And as a result, it can feel like at times when like 2 or 3 people are there doing something that other folks would prefer that they don't, that it really discourages others from using it. So when I'm looking at the schemes here, I'm looking at potentially like what creates areas of where people can just be and have their space. Because I don't necessarily think that a goal of this is like prevent certain types of people from using a park. It seems like that's not a goal that we've listed here, but rather allow like the whole neighborhood to use the park and feel safe and comfortable doing that. So when I look at like scheme B, for example, I see like the clustering of like certain types of uses together that give areas that make sense at the south edge of the park or in the middle of the lawn, around other pathways for like just other people to be and to do their thing if they're going to be quiet, or if they're going to make a big mess, that it's not in the one place that other folks have to be. Right now, it's like everything is on top of, it just always seems like there's some unclaimed space, like right next to the playground or in the middle of the playground or next to the basketball court or next to the one bench. And so I'm personally seeing in scheme B, with the exception of the location of the entry, just the possibility that like there's just more clear, like, here's a space for this. Here's some other unprogrammed space that's got some distance between it. And
So you think B does a better job of making you feel safe because those things are close together?
No, because they're
Is that
separated.
oversimplifying it?
because in comparison to A, where like the spaces in between are just kind of just the same scale that they are now, like the whole middle of the berm, because there's a drain, really doesn't get used. So I kind of think of that as like it almost doesn't exist in the park currently as a usable space. So B seems to just create a little bit of breathing room around a lot of the edges in a way that maybe it could be beneficial. Maybe it could help.
Thank you. And then, okay, did you have your hand up, sir, in the back? I thought I saw you. I just want to make sure you are in my mind for later, but. All right, go ahead. For the teenagers. What about the adults? No adult?
So I think we have a double bay swing in there. We're planning for a 4 bay. That will allow us to get big kid swings and little toddler swings together. And then, of course, the playground, we'll think about making sure that we have bench seating for parents to be able to watch that. And depending on the scheme, make sure that the seating in, say, the group area does have some sight lines over the playground, because you don't always have all kids using one area at the same time. You have different age kids. Some want to run and play, some want to be on the swings, and some want to play basketball. So you're doing this, right? So that just, they're all a little different. Thank you. Okay, so let's, so on goal 1, I think just to summarize, looks like we've got a B and a C because of the skate, some skate. We've got 2 directions here on the skate. That's okay. But this is the kind of thing we want to think about, especially as we start developing our 3rd survey. Right now, 2nd one's out, and a lot of these questions are asked. And B, because it gives a little bit of breathing room, and some of that open lawn space starts to create some of those zones where people can go and hang out and just be in that space without being on top of somebody else. Okay, so
Still on A, I'm just curious, since we have so many neighbors here, like, who would be supportive of making the no parking around the park permanent? Show of hands.
It also has to be enforced in partnership with EPD.
Yeah.
okay, and enforced by
Okay.
EPD. So I'm just going to keep your hands up, and I'm just going to count for the sake of the owl and people on the screen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
All right.
Does anybody?
Lots okay with parking out there.
Does
Right?
anybody?
Oh, no, there's the hand. 17.
If anybody wants to speak to the other side of that, we'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
Is that if anybody is opposed to that?
I'm not opposed, but I just wanted to circle back about if there's a speed bump. I don't know if the park or if that's like a separate,
That's safety.
Yeah, that's safety.
if that's a possibility on that.
I had my hand up earlier.
Yeah.
I was concerned, you guys said you went out with parking ambassador and BPD, just kind of observed the berms and what hidden areas were there. Like, what did you observe while you were there? 'Cause
As
we
far as
observed-
other people using the park? Or
Obviously,
what do you?
the elephant in the room is the illicit activity at the park.
Yeah.
It's a major issue.
Mhm.
We see it daily, not hourly.
Yeah.
Down there, so I'm just curious, kind of what you guys observe. It seems the berms don't hide much. We live on 10, so we observe the people sitting on the front side of that berm on 10. They're not trying to hide from anything. It happens all day. So.
There's needles
So-
everywhere.
Yeah, there's needles everywhere, there's trash everywhere, there's people smoking meth, shooting heroin in plain view. So yeah, I was kind of concerned or curious what you guys observed when you went down there.
For sure.
So I can speak for what I observed there when I was there with the park ambassador. When I was there with EPD, it was a different story. None of the bad stuff is going on. In fact, the park scattered pretty quickly. But with the park ambassadors, it's sort of a different level of enforcement. you're right about the berms not technically hiding. It is, what they do is they create a space that feels like you've got some protection.
Yeah.
You've got your back to a berm. You don't have to worry as much of what's behind you as you do of what's in front of you. And so from an illicit standpoint, that, this spot right up here is a great spot for that. Because you can sit down there and yeah, you can still kind of see what's going on, but you've got time to react and you don't have to worry about, somebody seeing you from behind. So from that standpoint, from a surveillance standpoint, when EPD or ambassadors arrive, as soon as they come within view of the park, they need to be able to see what and where everybody is. And from that standpoint, those tall berms don't do it. And that's what we heard and that's what we understood. As far as what we saw when we were out there, I mean, you've seen more probably than I have. I've probably seen a sampling, and it was everything from chop shops to dealing out of a vehicle that was parked on the street prior to the parking restrictions, and then pretty raucous crowd that was, I don't know what they were doing, but our ambassadors actually called for help in order to come in and approach that crowd and work out what the issue was, because it was not a safe situation for one person to walk into. Plus, we were there doing something else. We were there looking at the trees, urban forestry trees. In fact, I personally asked for the escort because I knew I was going to be spending time in the park and going to be there alone with the urban forester. And we had a job to do, and we couldn't be worried about what's going on behind us or somebody approaching us. So we asked for that person to come and help us. We're aware of what the park issues are. We'd like for you to be able to take back the park. And I think some of these design options or a lot of these ideas help us do that from a physical standpoint. That's what we can do as park designers and park planners, is worry about those physical things. Knocking that berm down is one of is high on our list.
Yeah.
Does that answer everything that you were?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can appreciate what you guys' role is in, and I understand you're not forced, I just feel like a lot of this is not really addressing the actual issue going on in the park.
So she had her hand up
It's
first.
nice to have a new sign, but nobody's gonna go. You asked for an escort, imagine taking your children. You're a grown man.
We're hopeful that as we get more resources, by the time we're ready to build this park, things will be different. Can't promise that, but we are trying to get more resources to be able to get a better handle on it. So.
And that'd be great.
I'm glad it's a discussion point.
Yes.
At least some people.
Maybe we could add
Like one of those ones that does this. I like your thinking. All right. Fair swing. Okay. I think you had your hand up and then I'll come to you.
Yeah, I was just gonna speak to the safety concerns. I'm really optimistic about these options and improving it and having people in our neighborhood feeling safe to come and use the park so that we're offsetting how it's being used right now. Just speaking to the partnership, that integration piece with EPD and Parks Watch, reporting illegal camping and trash and things like that. Our kids were one of 3 families that catch the bus for elementary school at Grant and 10th. And first week of school, there's needles on the ground. 4 hours later, after calling it in, there's still needles on the ground. Overnight, there's definitely a lot of illegal activity. And so I'm just speaking to that unmet need of, there's the safe sleep site at 4th and Grant or so. Sometimes folks just aren't interested in those resources, but when we call in non-emergency for public health and safety concerns, we're being dismissed as it's a camping issue. It's going to go to some other, they're going to kick us off to some other way of reporting that. And so if we just kind of get that support and integrate the public safety concerns with wanting to have a nice space for everybody to enjoy. Just want to speak to that.
100%.
What number are you calling? Do you call 4800?
It's the 541
That's
682 5111.
For the needle pickups and things like that, you might call.
They said Cahoots does that, so they have to meet all of their needs, and then when they get around to it hours later, Cahoots usually picks it up.
You might call 682-4800 as well.
Okay.
That's our public works main line.
The public works.
And sometimes it's like our surface maintenance folks, they also do want to pick up, if there's trash like that. They'll also pick up dead animals. So 682-4800. Okay, well, either one, I think it was good in front of, so, yeah, try that.
This is a little bit, there's so many, like, do I call Public Works? Is this
Oh,
a park
100%.
thing?
I know, it's not clear.
Yeah, it's like, if I had a client who's like, who do I call? I'd be like, oh no, we're doing something wrong. I would really love it if it was like lighten the load on some of the neighbors to do like the neighborly.
And we're
good-
calling over
good
and
thing, so
over.
that
Yeah,
if it's not the right
We have
number.
neighbors buying used cars, just taking a parking space in the neighborhood
Yeah.
for no reason, just,
For no reason.
yeah,
Yeah.
just keep an RV out in front of their house.
So some of those are like, maybe that's a separate conversation where I know that the neighborhood association is getting back activated again.
Yeah.
October 2nd.
Yeah. So there's lots of really important things that haven't been getting addressed for a long
Yeah.
time with any sort of unified voice, and just people calling isn't doing it necessarily.
Right.
So,
That's exactly what I was just gonna plug, because you guys obviously all live right next to the park. So you are part of the Far West Neighborhood Association, which has been inactive for 7 years. There's a small group of us that are trying to get it reactivated. You should have all gotten a mailer about a meeting on October 2nd at the Buddha Eye Temple Community Block House. Because it went to all of the addresses. And in order to reactivate and be an official line of communication between the neighborhood and the city, we have to actually elect officers. There are 5 positions that we fill. We so far have 2 people, myself and one other, who are willing to step up to run this thing. And we need to have 10 people come on October 2nd to vote and have people. So once we can actually activate the neighborhood association, then the neighborhood association can actually be a collective voice to speak for the neighborhood and talk to the city and everything else. I know, like,
Need to come to this meeting. Anybody you know is willing to come. This is something that can actually make a difference. Really pro neighborhood associations. I want more. Let's figure out childcare, whatever. This is the way for you to have community with your neighbors, and then get it to the larger community and the city electeds and staff. So please come. I will be there. I think it's really important. I don't get to that end of my ward often enough, but it is as important as everybody else. An example, because I'm closer, is the JWN neighborhood, which has a very, very strong neighborhood association. And in that neighborhood association is Monroe Park, which has your problems. I know your problems intimately, even though it's a different area. And I really like these plans. I'm big on parks, especially neighborhood parks, that you get more dense. So I think this is a critical project, and the safety, I'm sorry, but that's really got to be number 1. So it's beautiful. I love it. Keep going. Come to the neighborhood meeting, and you can always email me. Possibly I will be able to answer you. Please keep calling. I know it's horrible, and you got everybody on speed dial. You call them every day, and it feels useless, but they are adding up those data points, and they do make a difference. Your voices, your letters, those make a huge difference too. But it helps me if it's backed up by water. It's a big battle, and let's do it.
Do you have a contact information for the neighborhood organization? One of our attendees is asking.
farwesteugene@gmail.com.
Perfect, thank you.
farwesteugene@gmail.com,
You know,
just for the mic.
yeah, if you email that, then you'll get an auto response with all of the information about the October 2nd meeting. And then also I would say, get each other's phone numbers. And when you want to go play on the playground, call your strength in numbers. Call your neighbors and go together.
There's the best thing to get safety is to get people in the park. And it's hard when it's nerve-wracking like this, the danger. So I'm with you, I applaud you.
And I just want to emphasize Councilor Semple's comment about continuing to call. I know it's a pain, but
Oh, no,
it
We
does.
call every day.
Good.
We take
Okay.
pictures and document public works every day.
Okay,
And we talked with 2 police officers that just happened to be there, and they said that the last few weeks that 10th and Grant has been on their radar, and they come in twice a day to talk with people, and
Keep it up, if the day's there, it's really hard to argue.
I can maybe take a different approach to goals 2 and 3 is maybe let's take a look at option A and ask for a few comments. So we're looking at a way to promote intergenerational neighborhood fun. What does that mean? We heard that there aren't enough places where 2 people can sit together, or 2 families can sit together and talk, and enough things for different generations to do. So with an improved playground, basketball court, the gathering area where it is, how well do you think option A hits that goal? That's on the top of your list, or do you think you're waiting for options B or C to raise your hand? So this is the one where everything has a little bit of breathing room around it. That's the way I described it anyway. So there are a couple of buffers. Okay, and how about for creating that beautiful park entry and recognition of Martin Luther King and doing something interpretive? That's where we did the interpretation up there on the corner, right near the existing entry, and we have those walls popping up. So you walk through those walls. Again, what that art is, whether it's murals or quotes on the front, you know, of people who inspired Dr. Martin Luther King, and on the back, people who were inspired by him, something like that. Something is going to happen there with those walls, but you pass through that and it's on the corner. So how many people like that? That one here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Great. All right, now how about option B? Option B, again, for the same goal of promoting intergenerational fun. Now this one, all that stuff is a little bit closer together. We also got the big open lawn, which is kind of like another space. You know, right now there are a couple little sprinkle open lawn spaces out there in the corners that aren't super flat. The one on the bottom right is super flat. But by combining all those use areas, playground, gathering, and basketball, we open up that lawn as another use area. How many people think that's a good way to promote people coming out to the park and giving people something to do? Simple, 1, 2, 3. You can vote twice. 4.
There's no rule.
5. Is that 5, 6, 2, 9? Okay, thank you. And then for recognizing Martin Luther King, his life and legacy. What do you think about this option B scheme here? Is that entry off of Grand Street, pulling those plantings out, and then having some sort of a pillar as the way to a series of pillars in order to tell that story?
Yeah.
1,
Great.
2. You want to expand on that? You want to say what you like about it?
Well, I like having some memorial to MLK at MLK Park. I wasn't crazy about the wall ideas. I feel like walls can attract graffiti. And especially a wall right at the back, would be abutting my yard.
So you
And
mean
I
this
don't really
full
want a big large wall like right against my fence. But yeah, and then the other ones, that's better, but once again, I feel like graffiti is asking to be vandalized. Whereas the pillars are a little more, I don't know, it's a different approach.
Yeah.
I'd like if it gives a real entryway.
Yeah.
You know, in the middle, and just from the picture, I want to go in there and see what's on those placards, and I know there's some seating over there, so I really like that as a statement.
The threshold.
If it's on the wall, you have to get to the back. of the car. And this way, maybe you're just walking by, but you still see that information.
You think, are you saying A or B?
No, it's not.
B. So B is where you're actually walking in and amongst the thing, whatever the thing is, whereas in A, you're walking through it and it's, you can see it, but you can't necessarily touch it or hug it or.
I'll just clarify, A or B for me are both pretty big, but I'll lean towards B.
Got it. Thank you.
The one thing I'm just gonna jump in, one thing I like about B is the path that goes all the way.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
circular.
I think from being at Monroe, where the path goes all the way around, without that, you can have dead spots.
And it's a nice proportion of the open flat space and then the gathering play areas.
Yeah, that is one complaint that I have about it now, that the path dumps into the playground and you can't take your stroller all the way across the park.
Thank you.
A
Yes.
little bit of a headache.
Good to know.
Yeah,
We'll note
It's,
that.
it feels like a dead end, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a dead end.
Yeah, where you gotta go cart through
Yeah,
the
just
playground and
go
then
through it.
hop up the curb again, right?
I would say that the open lawn area in option B, I mean, I want to go there and play frisbee. I want to go there and toss a softball with my daughter. It's like, it's an open area where you can actually do an activity, or you can throw down a blanket and read a book. You know, it's more inviting.
That's an activity that we don't currently accommodate on the park. Okay. It's kind of like a. How about C? Is there something about C that really works for promoting that, that grouping? I mean, we do have things pretty well grouped in here, maybe even a little bit too much, too tight, because that skate thing is trying to take up a lot of space. So there's a lot of activity going on there. Is it too much? Is it not enough?
The path also kind of juts down in the center rather than around like beams. A little bit different.
It does cut through all the way.
Right, it does,
Yeah,
but it
you're right.
doesn't-
It doesn't loop to the backside just because there's a hill up there. So this is this basically keeps it at a very gentle sloping pace so that it's wheelchair accessible. Yeah, we couldn't go all the way up on top of the berm for that. That's a good point. So,
Yes.
and did anybody feel like that hits goal two a little bit?
Oh, you have a question, sorry.
Yeah, it's kind of a comment. Like, I think the idea that skate feature using the existing wall, I think in concept, it's really cool. I think it is like like advertising this as like a skate area is one thing, but creating the opportunity for somebody to like use it for something is another. Whereas other parks are like actively discouraging skating with the little like slide guards and stuff like that. However, the berm at the back, I think in this case, seems like it would create that situation of like overly defensible space of like, yeah, you can see it coming in from a couple of vantage points, but also like somebody posted there can see the whole thing and could pretty easily skedaddle if
They post their flag on the hill and this is my defensible zone.
and that's also the zone that is currently like, it's used in that way. Like folks are commonly back there and that's like tends to be where it's kind of really colonized. So I don't necessarily see that changing with this just because the topography in front is slightly different. My other question with this, and it might relate to the other two as well, is the other thing in there is the electrical transformer box. It's kind of like a latrine garbage can. It's nasty. Is there the intent to coordinate with eWeb to get that put underground like the rest of the city's electrical utilities are?
No, not currently, because what that ends up triggering then is taking care of that whole alley.
That's a question.
Burying the utilities that run through there, so.
Well,
that-
just
would-
that pedestal.
Just
Just
well,
curious
the
if-
pedestal that you're referring to, that's an irrigation pedestal, the big one. And we are gonna find a new home for that, probably somewhere on the perimeter of the park where it's easier for our staff to get to
That's
and
kind of
maintain and use, and they don't have to wipe off the
But will you need to retain that above ground pedestal in that same way?
Yes, there does need to be an above ground pedestal somewhere in the park.
But you're saying it's a latrine right now?
It's like a drop box, it's a
drop box?
dead
Yeah.
drops.
Oh,
people
I
drop
see.
That
it,
element
leave it
goes
there
away,
for
but
that.
there's something else there above ground that might need to go, but the electric that you're referring to, there are overhead lines that run through the park. And burying overhead lines through a park,
No.
yeah,
It's
that's a
just
real,
that
that's a big
utility,
deal.
just that
Yeah.
piece, that structure there that's
Gotcha.
at the bed, it's kind of surrounded by St. John's Wort.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
where kind
All
of
of
the
it.
path dead ends off of.
And there's that path that could go through the,
It could.
yeah, but it
A good
doesn't.
chunk of that will go away and find a home somewhere else.
Yes. But that's a good note, because I don't think I observed it how you did, so it's, adjusting in my mind, which is
Yeah.
interesting. Emily, did you say you had a question online?
I think we're good.
Okay.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Can we leave any questions unasked? I feel like we bounced around a little bit, but we did get a chance to talk about all the schemes in here. We've got about 5 or 6 minutes left, and let's do this. This is a little bit unplanned. Emily's looking worried now. I said, this is a little unplanned, but if you could pick something from A and B and C and try to hybridize those things together, what would those things be that you'd want to do? So let's pick, I don't know, 3 or 4 people. Alexis, I'm putting you in charge of that.
I mean, if you want to say something, raise your hand, I'll pick you. Go ahead.
So I like the concept in B with the bump out and the pillars and that kind of entry, but I'm curious what that concept would be at the corner where the entrance is at A.
Because currently it would be facing the alley. is what
Right,
y'all
and
were
I just
saying.
think that's a nice location for the entrance, but I like the B concept.
Gotcha. Okay, and then is there anything you would take from A? to combine with that? Or no, you said B, you like the B entrance.
In the location of
You
A.
like the idea of the
Thank you.
plantings in the
corner.
street, that they do something.
Right, okay. And this is all about the entry sequence and space creating.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay. Thank you. That's great. And then back there.
Can I get some clarification on what the wall in the back would look like? Because I think the mural would be really pretty, but I wasn't sure what it would look like.
Sure.
That's a great question. I want to know
I'm
too.
gonna have to draw on the spot, but so the wall and the berm that's out there is about yay high. Okay. The most the obvious solution for that wall is what's called a CMU, a retaining wall. It's kind of stacked and sets back a little bit. It works without footing, so it's essentially going to be, I want to say, about 6 courses like this of a wall. Okay. I'm going to redraw that because it's really more like that. They're really stacked on top of each other tight. Okay. And then from there, we would have a wood fence. So this would be the park side, and this would be the neighbor side. So this is taking up that initial height that allows us to build the berm up to that height, and then the fence is above that. So the art piece only happens on the fence. The art doesn't happen on the wall. From the neighbor standpoint, and I can say this from personal experience because we just had an empty field behind us developed. And they did just that. They actually built a short wall like this and then put a fence on top of it. We took our fence down. We got a whole like 4 inches extra space, 4 inches. Not great, but we got a beautiful wall. Actually, pretty expensive one that we can't afford. So from a neighbor standpoint, that's something that we do still need to work through because we realize there are 2 people that are going to be very affected by that. And we need to work out what the height of this is going to be. But right now it's a double wall fence and it's very hard to maintain. There are a lot of weeds in there. We'd like to get in there.
St. John's.
Pull the old, I think there are 2 or 3 different kinds of fencing back. Pull those out, clean that out completely and reset it so that it's easily maintainable from both sides.
Does that answer?
Oh,
it?
just,
Yeah.
just to clarify, is that, okay, so you build a wooden fence,
That's correct.
and then there'd be murals on the.
That's correct. We do the murals.
Facing the park. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a pretty nice mural as an example on a wood fence over at Charles Mulligan Park. It's a good example. We did a chain link art fence at the Downton Riverfront. We've had some good success with fence art lately. So I'm gonna go out and see it.
Yeah. Endless possibilities with the actual art, which is cool.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think we're like attempting to hybridize.
Yes,
right?
we are.
Okay. So I think like the concept of some type of mural or opportunity for that along the fence. It looks like there's a fence in all of these would be super cool.
Mm.
Improving, using this as an opportunity to improve some of that right away along Grant, if it's at 10th, if it's mid-block, plantings, narrowing the right of way so that cars don't have quite as much berth to feel like they can go as
Mhm.
fast, and create some nicer shape out there.
Mm.
And then I think the like circulation in B. I like
Mhm.
that circulation.
Great.
You touched on something that I just wanted to go back to, which is the bump outs. So traffic calming, which is what we call the ways of getting cars to slow down. That's one of the things you can do for traffic calming, is you put those bump outs in, and typically you see those bump outs with a crosswalk. We don't have a crosswalk somewhere to go to with that crosswalk because it's mid-block and it's a small neighborhood. It's not really ideally where you do that. We're doing it because we're trying to make a better entry for the park. But that will actually slow traffic down on Grant Street. The whole discussion of speed bumps and speed humps. If you're interested, you can take a look at the minutes on the Striker Field Park development. That was a big active discussion there. You know, a question of trying to do that. It is, it's an uphill battle in a neighborhood of this size and scale based on the traffic numbers that are coming in. So, for example, with Striker Field, we could electively, as a park organization, use part of our budget to build speed humps and traffic circles. In a park of this size, that's gonna eat into easily half or more of the park budget, which would mean there would be almost nothing to redevelop in here. They are expensive, the traffic calming. And from so like if you talk to a traffic engineer, not us, who would just say, yeah, the numbers aren't there and you know, it's not warranted, we're not gonna give you one. You know, we might be willing to do that. It does come out of the park budget, but that's also telling us something. It's telling us that in a neighborhood that size, you know, that speeding, that, you know, those bumps aren't necessarily going to do it because you know, they've got this down. They really understand how that works. I know that a lot of people think that's the great solution and that's going to fix it. It doesn't always. So we just have to make a good decision on that based on the traffic numbers that are there. With that, I just want to say thank you. I'll check. Were there any other questions or comments that we should repeat out loud online? Thank you, Emily, for monitoring that. And with that, I think we're going to close. If you haven't taken the survey, Alyssa has some reminders. Did you have pizza?
Pizza to take home.
Yeah.
You want pizza to take home.
I want a pizza.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Thank you all for coming
If you
so
haven't
much.
taken the survey, please do. Please sign up is not posted or public. We don't scan that, and post it anywhere in minutes. But we do use that if it's okay with you to add into the interested parties list. That way you'll get the announcement for the next public workshop. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you to staff for putting this on and really to everyone who came and left for participating. So let's get your part. Thank you.